Okay, I'm going to call this meeting to order. Welcome, everyone. Let's start off with, we would like to honor the four nations whose traditional land we live and learn. The Cynics, the Ktunaxa, the Secwepemc, and the Silks. We respectively acknowledge Indigenous people, recognizing that our students come to us with Aboriginal ancestry from a variety of ancient homelands. So on that note, I'll ask for an approval of the agenda. Elmer, seconded Leslie. All those in favor? Carried. And our minutes from our last meeting on February the 3rd. Ask for a motion to approve those. Elmer, any discussion or questions? All those in favor? Carried. Give them delegations, no special reports, no business arising. Take this right to superintendent's report.
All right.
Go for it.
Yeah, you bet. Okay, so I'll highlight a number and then of course I'll answer any questions you might have about other areas. I just wanted to confirm item number 8 that working very closely. Andy Pfeiffer does a significant amount of work with the international students. This year we had as many as 20 international students in the school for a single semester. We've already approved for next year 17 international students. We did have a little meeting with Duncan McLeod from RMI regarding the total numbers. He would very much like to place more students here. We're feeling that the 17 to 20 range is kind of the max where we're still getting international student experience so that we don't have students grouping up once they get here. If you get too many international students, they become their own little group and they don't get that international experience. So Duncan recognizes the quality that we're providing by doing that, and there's some budget decisions there as well, because of course the international students bring with some revenue with them, but we're capping at that right now, and we may go to 20, so basically leave us a couple of spaces for a couple of the students to come along. Item number 13, finalize memorandum of understanding with the provincial opt clinic. It's now I believe we're in our 3rd week running the clinic at RSS right out of the counseling center. It's gone very well. Having talked to Jen Schott, the health nurse that attends on Monday or Tuesday. If Monday's a holiday, then she just bumps it to Tuesday. They've got a nice small little sign there, and reports from the counseling center is that students are accessing. And really what this is about is getting good information, because there's very little good information for students if they're relying on alternate sources for sexual health and education that way. So having Jen right in the building is going to be a really great thing for our students. Item number 20, the QP liaison meeting right now, as trustees will see at the next board meeting, we'll be approving the 16-17 calendar. Once again, we're looking at the 2-week spring break, which is very similar to the calendar that we had this year. Working with QP, Clara and QP, on looking at the total work year, because this doesn't impact our QP employees, because it represents 2 fewer days of instruction when we're going to a 2-week spring break, and inclusive of our summer work days. So we'll work with our QP. We really value the work that obviously that QP is doing, and don't want them seeing unduly being cut back just because we made a decision with a 2-week spring break. So there's lots of opportunities to do some creative things around them, with them still providing high levels of support for us. Item number 23, speaking of our QP staff, really, and this came up today with our audit, which I'll update you in a moment as well. The training that our educational assistants get is, you're likely aware, during 5 non-instructional days during the course of the year, we pay our QP educational assistants 3 of those 5 days for professional development, and then offer them specific training on those days as well. And Laura Paymont was most recently up for the new non-instructional day. That was as soon as that day was set, we went looking for some really sound, solid professional development for them, and Laura provided that, and actually she's going to continue on working with Begbie Elementary on a special project they've got going, which you'll hear more about in the future. Item number 31, lots to do with the budget this year, or this last month, and working with Bruce a fair bit on that. Just wanted to point out that we did need to look at very carefully at the new teacher mentoring project. This past year, the board, we had allocated funding to the new teacher mentoring project, but there was substantial funding that we were able to get for the 2-year project for 2 years from through BCSSA, BCTF, and UBC, and the Ministry of Education to provide for all the 4 release days for each of our participants in the mentor program. So that's a substantial cost going forward should we decide to do it exactly that way. We have formed a mentorship steering committee, and 4 of the current mentors agreed to sit on that committee, and they'll be representatives, of course, as well from principals and Jennifer and others going forward for how we're going to make sure that mentoring project continues without the real specific financial support from the source I mentioned. Finally, number 48 and 49, Todd, I've got right now Todd Hicks is providing some support, getting ready for staffing for 16-17, and just to point out that as we're wrapping up the 15-16 amended annual budget tonight, we're now in the process of starting to make projections for next year, because we're needing to make staffing decisions in March and April, prepare particularly right now, looking at starting with our educational supports for students with special needs. And finally, just a shout out to the high school staff, and particularly with Jody Wallet and Aaron Williams, and then all the support that they received in the grad transitions evenings. And I know many of you had the opportunity in the past to participate in those. It's an excellent connection with for folks that aren't really quite sure what our grade 12s have been up to. And what's probably the most interesting part, I think the people that are involved agree that you get to see a very different side of our students, because they say, here's what's important to me, and that makes for an entertaining evening. Most teams of 3 adults saw 4 different graduates. Some teams saw 3 and some saw 4, so they put on about a 20-minute presentation for their grad transitions, and it's an excellent process, and it's not one that's being done everywhere. It's one that was locally developed and has become quite an event. 49 students signed up for the first one, and not too many years ago it was tough to get them out to do it, but grads are talking about it now and they enjoy it. And then I've just highlighted on there, you've got it on your calendar coming up, but we've only got one more board meeting in this room before we head off to schools. Looking forward to that as well.
Okay. So the March 16th meeting is here, but the 12th, April 12th, is that
Off we go, yeah.
Good. Any questions, comments? Leslie first?
Number 35, Mike.
Sure.
The district's gifted program. I know a few parents who would really like to know where they could find information about what that is.
Sure.
Where would we go?
You could direct them right to the principal. Absolutely.
That
So-
apparently has not been fruitful.
Then on to me then next.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure.
I have the same.
Yeah.
I just wondered what the staff is, who is supervising that. Is it a teacher in one school or every school?
Yeah, there's a teacher who takes an assignment in each of the 4 schools. It is within the district principal student services supervision. So it's always been a part of that job in terms of who supervises. We have the comprehensive, in fact, it was part of our audit, which in terms of looking at how we're identifying students, we begin identifying students with the Canadian Achievement Test in grade 3, identifying students that meet the ministry category. So there's a misunderstanding often around gifted education, where people think that if they've got, it's a common misunderstanding that if you're bright, then you're gifted. Gifted is a very specific category with a very specific set of criteria, including IQ, and then we do a grade 3 screening to get ready for grade 4, and then there's monitoring that goes along that way too. So, yeah.
And also was,
Sure.
with the new emphasis in curriculum, new curriculum and all that, is there any matching or plans for sort of enhanced some kind to do with the gifted programs?
It's not specifically pointed out that way, and part of the intention is that the nature of the redesign of the curriculum is really is to try to get to a point where teachers have the flexibility in the curriculum to be a lot more student-centered and following individual student paths. And so that really is what is at the heart of the gifted program, which is trying to say, if your kids are talented in a particular area, how can I help you achieve goals in that area? Yeah. But it is not specifically pulled out. It's probably quite intentionally not. Yeah. Great.
I was going to comment on number 35, but for a different reason, and that's that I believe that one of the services that we provide in this district that we don't talk about enough is the services provided by the district psychologist. And with we have a higher level of service than I believe most districts do in this area, and so that results in early assessment, testing, identification of needs that students have, and then also earlier individualized programs, and then also extra education assistance time. And so I think that's a service that we should be pretty proud of, to get the assistance to students earlier. And my guess is that's probably gonna be helpful when we hear more about the audit report, because, you know, we do a very good job in this district of identifying needs that students have, and that's partially due to the testing that's done here.
Yeah, it absolutely is, yeah, and that's gonna come up in the audit for sure.
Okay, thanks. Elmer?
Yeah, number 8 and 9, are they connected?
Yeah, oh, absolutely, yes, yeah, because MLI has generally speaking, has talking to them to say, we're about to fill ourselves up, are you looking for space? Because we do like to spread it around a little bit if we can, yeah.
So potentially there's growth there, like, are they, is this English as a second language, or?
The local language?
Yeah.
They do a variety of things, and one of them is international students. They also support us in our Japanese exchange program.
Okay.
So they do exchange programs, but, so they do some international, but really they're about exchanges.
Okay.
So, and we like it, the relationship we have with them, so I just, before we fill up, I just like to touch base
Okay.
with this area, send somebody our way. And if there aren't any other questions, then this would be a great place to give a little update too on the audit.
Are you,
Yeah.
are you still, more questions?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Number 6, this one about the grade level of grade school now, they have to grade 4 or 5, or?
They currently have up to 5. I'm not sure, Jeff, they haven't communicated that with us, yeah.
Number of students maybe, or?
No, neither that. That has not changed from the start of the year. Are they, do you know offhand, Michelle? Can I look at it because I know they're there. They're in the neighborhood of 28 students, yeah.
I've heard 30-something, but I don't know. for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah. No, they've not communicated that. Only that they want some more space, so we're working with them on what kind of space they're gonna get.
Okay. And 32?
Number 32? Sure. Glasses back on. Go ahead, you start.
That's like bingo.
Yeah, under page 3, number 32. And it's gone. Oh, yeah, okay, so you want to ask a question, or I'm just explain it?
The annual highlights
Yeah.
section is a possibility of review.
Yeah.
And in the past, we've had like education
Mhm.
meetings and supplementing the
Yeah.
review. David, I remember that.
Yes, yeah.
I guess there's no education week anymore, but.
Not a formal way that way, that's right, yeah.
But at least, and this is one of the things we mentioned in our communications.
Yeah.
Possibility.
Yes, yeah.
It's on the list, but.
Yeah,
So it looks like a little bit of a step, first step there. Anyway.
that's right, yeah.
Okay. And, okay. No, that's fine.
You good? Okay, all right.
Okay.
So you want me to do a lot of updating?
Is that it then? on that?
Unless you want to ask.
No, I didn't.
Don't be shy, eh? Yeah, okay. Okay, can I provide a little, as a part of this report, then I just.
Oh, yeah,
want to
sure.
provide
On
a
the
little
audit,
bit of
on the
update.
audit, sure.
We will get written confirmation, so we just, an hour ago, convened the exit meeting with our audit team. The team of 3 auditors joined us, all with obviously extensive special education background. Recall that we were notified in November that we'd be part of that audit process that the ministry conducts in the spring. They came to review 183 total files, including 50 gifted students, 85 students with Q or learning disabled codes, and then the balance with what we call low incidence or level 1, 2, and 3, requiring a fair bit of support. So that's a big task to do in 3 days to 3 people. It was a tremendous, I will say, a good amount of work to get ready for them. Our files are upstairs, they need everything on site.
No anymore, Ariel just carried them all.
Yeah, she took ours, yeah, she did not carry ours, that's it. In terms of preparation. So I will be providing you with a full written report as soon as I get a written report back from them. Obviously, they gave a verbal update today with what they saw, and the board will receive a formal report from the Ministry of Education on the audit, and then we'll have a little more discussion at that point. The long story short is that we had an outstanding audit. We were concerned, and we had discussed, I mean, any time that they're looking through files that they were reviewing about $700,000 worth of funding in rough numbers. And had we been losing any of that funding, that would obviously be a big concern to us. So, and it is not unusual for districts to lose funding after an audit for a variety of reasons, not because of not providing service, but because they're missing steps or missing processes. They did take our student handbook away with them, asked if they could use it as a resource. They did also ask if we would be able to, if we would be willing to provide some support to other districts that are struggling with their student services, because they found our processes to be, in short, they found them to be outstanding. I'm going to need to brag for a little bit because it's not me, it's our team, but I'm going to have to say that it was outstanding. Pam Cameron, who led the team, I wasn't gonna ask her this, but our student services people weren't shy, and somebody said at the end of their presentation, said, have you had an audit like this before? Have you had what they call a clean audit? We didn't have a single change to an IEP. We didn't have a single dollar loss. And they commended the work, and they're not supposed to commend the work, they're supposed to come and acknowledge the work. So Alice McGrath asked, is this common? And I knew it wasn't, because I've talked to our other superintendents in advance of this, knowing it's not common. Pam said, she's been auditing for the last 7 years, and she said and she has not had an audit that's been clean before. She's been 2008 to now, hasn't had that. So fair to say we're pretty tight. And I felt like our student services team was very, very excited with that, because it's a real acknowledgement of the work that we're doing, and an acknowledgement of the work that had been done. We had some outstanding people all the way back from 2005 working on it with Ann and Jane and Shan Jorgensen in the past, and these are processes that have been put into place and maintained. And a large piece of that, Alan, you mentioned our district school psychologist, when they looked at the levels of service that we have, said we're a district of 1,000 students, of under 1,000 students, and we have a full-time school psychologist. We have an 8/10 speech and language pathologist. We have the levels of service we're providing in our classes, and that EA hours. They were astounded. They were from North Vancouver. Auditors were from North Vancouver, from Qualicum, and from Langley, educators from there. And obviously we're doing this work provincially. So it was a great afternoon. It wrapped up at 4:30, and I promised the student services team a party at some point, because they deserve it, because they worked tremendously hard to get us into this position. But it really is just reflective of the work that's going on all the time. So really very proud of them, and pleased with the result.
Good. And I think I know what you're gonna say. Go ahead.
Okay. I know, I was just gonna say that it is something to be very proud of, and I've talked to a lot of school districts around the province, and when they've gone through their audits, they always talk about how much money they've lost as a result of the audits and the budget problems that are caused by it. And so for us to have the clean audit, if you wish, is remarkable, and it is a real tribute. So I'd make a motion that we send a letter to all members involved with the team, just congratulating them on the outstanding work they've been doing.
Second to that. Jeff, any other discussion? I knew you were gonna say that, see?
Very predictable, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's it.
No, it's great work.
Yeah.
No, and I think it's really appropriate that we do that based on what they've gone through the last meetings and everything else. And based on what we heard about how audits happen in other areas of the province at the provincial council meeting
Yeah.
on the weekend.
Can we vote?
So, sorry?
Can we vote?
Yeah, we're gonna.
Oh, sorry.
Are you rushing things?
It's pink shirt day today.
Okay. Wild shot.
All those in favor?
Yeah, there we go.
Thank you, John.
You got a place you wanna be at?
Moving on.
Okay, the next item is the policy 3.8, information technology. Mike.
Okay, we're having a little technical, we just, something's a little bit loose here. I can see it, you guys can, there you can too. Yeah, all right, so this policy, you'll recall, it's been to us, it's been out in circulation, and that process is done. There were no recommendations beyond the ones we already made changes to. And recall that this was started when we first looked at it was called BC ESIS prior. Obviously, we need to change the name because there's no longer a BC ESIS for My Education BC. At the same time, we went through a process of updating the language because there was some old language there related to technologies that no longer exist, and also some language that we like a little bit better in terms of spelling out acceptable use in a more positive fashion. And so there were some language changes as well there, but content remains compliant with what our expectations are around privacy.
Did someone have a recommendation? Jeff, seconder. Elmer, any discussion? All those in favor then? Carried. Okay. The school growth plans.
Okay. All right, so once again, you recall at our last meeting, we reviewed the school plans from where are we, over in the west? From RSS and Air Heights, and now we moved east to Begbie and Plumby Park. You have two plans there, and a reminder, both those plans will form the basis of a fair bit of discussion as the principals present to you in their annual reports, but I thought I'd highlight a couple of pieces for them. Highlighted both the goals, which, as you're aware, all four schools are maintaining goals. Number one goals around health and wellness and connectedness, because we know that to be the most important thing our students need from us before they get to learning. The structure for our plans remains the same. The rationale is pointing out that, when the goal's being developed, the rationale comes from discussion regarding why would this be important to us, and I thought the third bullet on Begbie was worth noting that, well, they all are, but this one particularly sums it up. We'd like to continue to create safe, connected, supportive school community that will enhance the sense of belonging in students, foster respectful, responsible, and thoughtful behaviors, and promote students' success in school and in life. And then that guides that work from there on. A number of, obviously, and you've seen, you'll have Yan Ping describing some of these to you as we work through, but they're there for your review right now. The list of things that we continue to track to make sure that we're asking the right questions, because we need to know what our students are saying in order to ask the questions about what we ought to be doing and what we can do to support them. So the MDIs continue to focus us on a variety of areas, all the way from connecting with adults at school through to happiness. And just in a general way, if you look at that top chart, the nice thing about these graphics, because they're just discussion, they really should not be pulled apart for individual, because it's not individual results. This isn't about individual students. It's about patterns of behavior or patterns of movement. And if you just kind of help me out with that color, what's the lightest color there? The green. So the green, in general, when you're looking at groupings, if you're seeing a slope upwards, then that's generally a positive thing. So you look, well, there's a slope upwards there, and the percentage of students in grade 4 over the last 3 years that are reporting that they're more connected with adults. So that's a general trend upwards. Then you see a corresponding trend, the number of reporting 1 or less has dropped, which is a positive thing. So just in general, looking for trends is what is sort of an interesting starting point. Because then when you find some trends, then you go and see, so there's some trends, what kind of questions you're asking, and what are you doing about it? And a lot of what you're doing about it comes into the strategies and structures section, which I'll highlight for you in just a moment as well. Likewise with the patterns regarding whether you like school and are you enjoying what you're learning, and you can clearly see a connection there. If you like school, and you're more likely to like what you're learning, and if you're not liking what in school, then you're not likely liking what you're learning either. So those discussions. And the grade 3 was interesting here, down in the bottom left corner. The way this graph reads, it takes a little bit of work to pull it out, but the 2 lower bands are the grade 3s in grade 4 in 2014. And the 2, the red and blue, the 2 taller bands, the more positive ones.
Some would call it purple.
Purple, red and purple. Those 2 represent what the grade 3s said in there, and what that grade 3 grouping said in 2014 and 15. So you see they're connected. And what you see is a response when somebody looked at that and said that for some reason students are reporting very low there, so you intervene, and then the next year you say, oh, okay, well, we've begun to address that. So that's the value of the data in that way. Begbeview's got a huge amount of data that they like to look at, and I sat in on their staff meeting when they did this, a last look at this, and it does generate excellent discussion, but as you can well see there's a tremendous amount of stuff that they work their way through. And then I mentioned the strategies instruction, and this is root structures. This is really the rubber hits the road spot where you say, so what are you doing when you're responding to students saying that they are responding whatever way they're on the MDI or satisfaction surveys? This is the same things we say when somebody says, so what are you doing about it? This is it. And I've highlighted a few of them on here that I think are important in terms of the high school connections, the MDI sessions, high school student visits back to the elementary connecting, mentoring programs, the high school students coaching, and then the student leadership with the Spirit Squad, lunch monitors, morning announcements, and assemblies, and those kinds of things. And then all the things around the pro-social activities, the Media We team, and the projects, the food drive, the Terry Foxer, and the Jump Rope for Heart. So all these things are the things that you do, but you need it's just a part of school life. You say, but why do we do them? Well, we're doing them to build community. And so they're not just day fillers, they're things that you do to build community in school. That's the checklist for staff and for PAC and for the parent group as they work their way through what they're doing. Likewise, growing the Columbia Park, same notion in terms of the rationale. Naturally, the school, and I felt like I wanted to share one particularly with you, that school success is optimized when children learn within a healthy, safe, and caring and supportive environment. Grade 7 students reported lower levels of school belonging than the grade 4 students. However, both groups reported much lower than average rates of bullying and victimization. And with their lower averages on what they're relating to is reporting that on that at no times or no time. What is it? The backwards one. At no time or few times, few times than at no time. So that's the positive side of the lower response. and obviously they continue to track that. There's a number of the pieces of data in there that they're using for discussion. Are you feeling welcome at school? How many adults are you connected with? And you have a quick look at those stats and notice that there continues to be an upward trend. Can't always keep going up, because when you get up into 80–90%, you're gonna have blips up and down, but then that causes this to talk about what's going on for that particular group. Again, the MDI results we're relying on for great discussion. These graphics are coming right from the MDI, and they're providing perfect opportunities to talk to students, because students, they like this graphic, it makes sense to them, they understand it, and it's a much more friendly way to put it to put this information to them than comes in a chart or a table. And then you can see we're tracking around the optimism, empathy, and pro-social behaviors. And a reminder that when we looked at MDI data in the past, this is the first year that we had provincial numbers in there, or provincial spots in there as well. So what you see in that little diamond is a provincial average, and on the line, the district average. And you'd expect them to be all pretty close, and they are. Columbia Park is obviously a little bit, I mean, they're above the provincial average in terms of the way their students are responding in a positive way. And then right on about naturally right on about our district average, because our schools all are really very similar in that regard. Again, we're doing the same thing with the grade 7s, and you see a very similar pattern with grade 7s that you saw with the grade 4s. And then in the strategy structures sections, a number of things, again, when you say, what are we doing? And this is where the staff come together and say, here's all the things we're doing intentionally to build community. And noting that the programs and projects to improve student mental health and wellness include things like Minds Up, the Mind Up program, the Zones of Regulation, grade 6 and 7 healthy inquiry projects, Incredible Flexible Need program, and Drug Abuse Resistance Education, the DARE program. So there's a huge amount going on that are addressing those intentions, and because we continue to gather information and discuss it, we're making sure that we're tracking it in a way that's proactive and good for students. So I would be happy to take any questions if you had any, but there's also just a little recommendation here on this first page.
Anybody have a question? Elmer, your hand went up.
As an educator, I'm a little concerned about one part, and that was the grade 7 MDI.
Mm-hmm.
With regards to the amount of sleep grade 7s are having.
Mm-hmm.
By my calculations, 25% of the grade 7s are going to bed at 11:30 at night.
Mm-hmm.
To me, that is excessive.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you can relate that directly to possible concerns with regards to optimism, outlook, positive nature.
Mm-hmm.
How can we address that?
So that's a great one, and that's why it's here, and that's why it is front and center. It's so it's being discussed at school, absolutely, and it's being discussed at the orientation, and I think Greg just lectured this grade 8 parents last time they came in about sleep. Everyone's guilty of it, and it's a lot associated with screens and with personal devices in bed. So it's being addressed, and you're quite right. So it needs to be here front and center and be identified as a problem before it's identified.
Yeah, how to include the parents, because obviously that's the key.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this is a great one, because not too many years ago you'd say, well, that's not the school's responsibility. Like that, I mean, that's not, when kids are going to bed, that's not our deal. We say, yes, it is. We can help educate parents to say, get your kids to bed. So it's there. Thanks for pointing that out, Elmer.
One of the guest speakers we had recently, Merlin Horton, talked on that very topic, and I heard that one of her suggestions was that to suggest to parents that the children keep their chargers in the kitchen, as an example, so that because it's easy if it's in the bedroom, it's just plugged in beside the bed, and then they can play with it till 11:30 or whatever. So it's just little things you can do to try to cut down screen time late at night, and so there are those educational sessions which I think are very good. The other comment I would just make that's I think I'm very pleased to see in particular with Begbie View is that and I give a lot of credit to the culture at Begbie View coming from the work that the staff and parents did when we combined the two schools of Mount Begbie and Mountain View, and they spent a lot of time working on expectations for behavior, how to blend some of the best practices from one school with the best practices from the other school, and I think that really got that school off to a good start, and we see the results now. So, and Columbia Park had gone through that years before, again with the Big Eddie students moving to Columbia Park, and the parent groups and staff at that time did a lot of work, and so that's, you know, schools do have different cultures, and so the work that was done has been really helpful.
Anybody else?
I'll just add to that, just very quickly, thank you, because, so you're gonna get a report at our next meeting, because today was Pink Day, of course, so at our next board meeting, we're gonna have a little presentation for you, wrapping up some of the things that took place today. But I sat in on the Begbie View Assembly today, and sitting beside Kim Floyd, that what the students had put together a slideshow, so all the classes had put their own thing on their kindness piece. The last little slideshow, which you will see a piece of, I looked over Kim at the end of it, and she had a tear in her eye, and as did I. I could not believe the impact that what the students, well, I could believe it, what the students had put together, the impact of that project, and the fact that the entire school was sitting there watching each other and clapping and cheering and laughing, and then just about crying in the end, because it was very moving. So they've worked hard at that. That's not easy. Yeah. All the way to the start of the assembly, we all stand up, and Michelle, you remember this for many years, and so you, Jennifer. We stood up and talked, and it's a student-led assembly, so they stood up quite noisy because they're excited, they're happy, and away they go. And Yan Ping came up to the front and said, "Thank you very much. Would you please sit down?" They all sat down, and we said, "No, when we stand quietly for all Canada." Stood back up again, dead silence. Okay, to kick it off. It's a reinforcing of expectations in a really polite, or in a really respectful and calm way. So, yeah.
And I'll take the motion now, the recommendation that's in
So moved.
the memo. Alan, and seconded Leslie. And just also, I just want to make a comment, you know, reading through this, of course, a lot of it is data and everything else, so sometimes your mind gets a little bit overwhelmed by all of it, but I just want to point out a couple things. And I know other trustees do this, but you want to see all of this in action, go to the schools. And I've been to Arrow Heights in the last little while, and Columbia Park. And I'm so proud of our schools. I'm so proud of the staff, the teaching staff, the principals, the support staff, and everything else. Because you go into those schools, you do see that they are communities, and you do see that they're really functioning at a high level. Now, that's not to say they're perfect, because there are issues, lots of them, and anybody that works in the school system can tell you that. But I think we should be really proud of our schools.
Yeah.
Any other discussion on the motion? All those in favor? Carried. Thanks.
Okay.
Okay.
Follow that, buddy.
Yeah.
Hey, money guy.
I'm still nervous, Jeff's gonna cut me off.
I was used to it on the face, so.
I don't know how to take that.
It's getting worse, Jeff. It's getting worse.
Okay, go ahead, Bruce.
The amended annual budget is before you, and a lot of the work, more work goes into the annual budget adopted in the spring. The superintendent noted earlier that within about 35 days, we'll start that process again, and that involves the union presidents, our principals, senior staff, and then we take it to the board. So what this does is that takes that where all the goals and directions are set by the board, and the amended budget takes it, says, okay, what's happened from when we did our first projections back in April, May of 2015. Now we have all the salary increases, we have the utilities, we actually know what's going on, we know our student numbers, and that's really what this does. So if you look at this and say, gosh, it's a almost $11 million budget, and we're in terms of the operating portion, we're dealing with it fairly quickly. Really what we're saying is we're modifying with all the work that was done in the spring. And so what you've got before you is the budget. Like I say, I'd like to highlight a few changes I think are significant, one of which is the first bullet near the bottom of the memo, which is the increasing Ministry of Education grants. And that was very significant because this year we were looking at something called funding protection, which I don't want to get technically, but you lose parts of that. So that would have been a loss for our district in revenue going into 16-17. So had nothing else changed, we would have lost that money, and we were able to actually earn that. What it really does is it helps you when you lose too many students. So this one said our students were stable enough for a population generated all their dollars. So I think that helps us going forward to 16-17. Obviously, we're talking before the meeting started with the way the weather is. I mean, we've had to cover a lot of increases, everything from benefit costs to all the salary employee groups increases. We've had the NGN network, which has been fairly significant in terms of the cost, both through the ministry program as well as through our own resource that we had to purchase to augment it. And then we've had some staffing increases in our classes, like I say, had more EAs, more teachers, and like Mike, you want to talk to one of those things?
Well, I would just highlight, just in terms of the EA hours as an example, starting up the year with 700 a week in EA time in the schools, and now it's sitting at 775, so that requires an adjustment, but it's a necessary adjustment, as the auditors pointed out, we're meeting student needs, so that is what the increased staffing is about, is based on student need. And I would just comment too that we're calling it appropriate class sizes. We're a little bit limited in terms of the size of our schools. And we had experienced this at Arrow Heights this year, where our primary classes are 23, 24, which is high for us. And we said, well, there's not really a way, that school's not large enough to reorganize at this point to get back into the 19, 20, 21 that we really quite like. And we're also still providing neighborhood school service. So we have some larger areas like 24 at primary and 21 or 22 at intermediate, and it's just kind of the way it works out. So we need to be prepared to do that. And as well, we're running as small as a class of 12 at RSS, and we need to be able to balance that with some other classes in there. So we would have classes at 29 and social studies and PE, but we need to be able to do that to run that full range of courses, and that costs money.
And we still build within the budget certain contingencies, for example, employees, there's still 5 months left in the school year, and so if there's serious injury or illness or someone had to extended period of time, we would have to cover them as well as their replacement. So, and we also the utilities. So there are some potentials, dollars that we have to reserve, but we may not spend. Overall, the price that those are in reserve of our surplus, requirement of surplus has gone up to almost half of what we have right now. It's over half. So we are hoping to find some efficiencies between now and the end of the year so we can not hit our current surplus that hard. And other than that, I don't know if there's any other questions. I'll try to answer them. I'll make up something.
Anybody, Alan, go ahead.
Just a comment, I think what this shows is that we got it right in the first place. And so where school districts run into problems are if they don't estimate their enrollment properly, and then they either put in services that the amended budget can't support, or the flip side is that they hold back too much money, then all of a sudden, in this time of year, say, oh, now we've got money to spend, and then they put in extra services that are not the most efficient way of spending money. So to me, what this shows is that we got it right in the first place, and that's really good news, because what that means is the students get the proper level of services for the whole school year, and that's a big part of budgeting.
I'd like to move that the board give first, second, third reading and adoption to this attached amended annual budget in the amount of 13 million, where's the figure? 493, 213.
So second to Elmer's motion. Jeff, any other discussion? Elmer, go ahead.
I'd just like to commend Bruce, here we go again, district staff and the whole budget committee for the hard work put in, and like Alan said, the accuracy involved, projecting. You can't have a sharper pencil than I think the committee showed. So kudos.
Any other comments? All those in favor then? Okay. Thank you very much, Bruce, for the presentation. This on to committee reports. The first one is the education committee, which I'll give a quick report on. That was our meeting that was held January 26th. You'll see that the focus of that discussion in those minutes was our BC education plan update that the committee is planning. Of course, that arises out of the goals that we set with regards to educational excellence. I just want to note, particularly out of that, we were looking at the date being April 25th for a community presentation, but the committee action met yesterday, we changed that to the 27th, and there'll be lots more details coming out about that in the next little while, but just mark that on your calendars, the 27th. So on that note, if I could have a motion to receive those minutes. Elmer, seconded Jeff. Any discussion on the questions? All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Communications Advisory Committee. That's Leslie, right?
That's it, Jeff.
I don't know who's getting.
Okay.
Oh, Jen's giving the report?
You can see the four of us met on February 2nd. And so we looked at the recommendations on communication in our last planning session. And so we decided we needed a few extra people, as a parent and a teacher and so on. And I think we said we have somebody.
We've got them all now, yeah.
Okay, that's good. And we decided to take up the first four of the items that were on our list of things to be done. And the first one would be to review our web design and content, and that's in the next meeting on March 7th. And the second, recognize and celebrate success in the school system. And third, develop an annual plan for communications, including intentional liaison with presentations to community groups. And then encourage parent and volunteer engagement in schools. So, I move my report be accepted.
Seconded. Donna, any other discussion or questions? All those in favor? Opposed, carried. Good. Thank you. VPAC, that's
It's me.
the Elmer?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Just to highlight, going down
There.
the White Hatter, April the 21st, 2016. Is that firmed up to 6:30 p.m.?
It's 6:30 p.m. Yes, it is, yeah.
So we'll be at 6:30. I'm quite happy to see that there will be free childcare, and that is provided by the PAC group, so kudos to them for offering that availability. That was the main thing that I wanted to highlight. So I guess I need to move that the minutes be accepted as presented.
The seconder? Leslie, any discussion, questions on that? All those in favor? Opposed, carried. Okay, the Brunswick Performing Arts Center Advisory Committee, I think that's Alan, right?
Yeah, we had a meeting on February 4th to just review the operations, and a couple sort of highlights. One is that the city has committed an additional $10,000 towards the group, and so that's needed because again, what we're looking at trying to do is get to sustainable funding. The problem that there is that a lot of the funding that's available, for example, from CBT would be more project related as opposed to paying for wages. And so that, but the committee can do a little bit of moving around to make sure that that's covered. And then Miriam was also meeting with the credit union to see if there's any extra support available there. The other thing Mike talked a little bit about is the license events, and basically reporting that it's working very well. And it's something that's, one of our responsibilities in having a theater through the Neighbor Learning Project is that it can operate independently from the school, but we have to think of the school first, and so it is working well so that the license events complement the activities. Again, as I say all the time, Marion's doing an outstanding job, and the quality and quantity of groups using the theater continues to grow. So overall, good meeting, but we still have some challenges in terms of the sustainable funding piece. So with that, I'd make a motion to receive the minutes.
Seconded. Jeff, question, discussion? All those in favor? Opposed, carried. And then we'll move on to the Aboriginal Education Advisory Committee, Leslie, right?
And yes, we met on February 4th. And when I think back, I have a feeling that I verbally presented some of the results of this to our group before, did I not do that last meeting?
That's good. Yes, it
I
is.
think I did mention
Yeah.
some of this,
Yeah.
because I had a concern at that time about the bursaries for graduating students. I've since learned that the $500 bursary is fairly standard, I think, but I've been assured that in the event that there are more than 3 bursaries required, we may be able to find the money for that, but that this isn't something that we want to actually build into the budget. Is that a fair way to put it?
That's a good way to say it, yes.
So I think, I think that's fine. There's something I would like to amend here about the enhancement agreement is something that, as I've mentioned, we've been working on throughout the whole year, quite intensively in the last couple of months. We've met 2 or 3 times, I think, and the enhancement agreement now is we're moving towards a draft stage, and the signing ceremony date has been changed at the top of page 2. It's now a week later than that, so it's not May 19th, it's May 26th. So if you could mark that down for your diaries, we would appreciate, of course, attendance from the board if it's possible. That is quite a significant event in the Aboriginal community and in the board, I think, for the school district, because this enhancement agreement, I think, has a 4-year cycle. And it has involved a lot of work on the part of the community. Last year, there were 3 or 4 community potlucks and things like that to gather information. And we're now meeting, the last meeting was just a couple of days ago, to try to hammer out wording that in fact incorporates all these hundreds, literally, of statements from people in the community about what they would like to see. And so Ariel and Michelle Cole and Lisa Kinsella-Sykes and Lisa Moore have been working really hard on that. And it's been, it's really an interesting process. I relegate myself to the role of scribe in many cases and use Ariel's computer as they talk. And my eyes were just doing this yesterday, or a couple of days ago, Monday I guess it was, from going up and down on the screen because Ariel has had discussions with, brain fart, the person in Vancouver, Colleen, right, Hannah, who looked at the draft that we had and had some comments about ensuring that every goal directly address student learning. And because of the community engagement, some of the goals originally that we had were really directed at community engagement, and so we have refashioned those to make community engagement more like a strategy that addresses student learning, because there's still quite a lot of concern about how the community interacts with the school. I think the small Aboriginal community. Another point that I can bring up here is we lost Sherelle Anderson, who's now on maternity leave, but I believe as of Monday we have somebody to replace her.
Karen O'Neill is moving over that position, yeah.
So the committee is thrilled
Good, yeah.
with
Karen's
this
fabulous,
replacement,
yeah.
so. And I think that's also, I would just,
Motion to receive.
that this report be received.
Seconder to that? Eleanor, any more discussion, questions? Not, all those in favor? Carried, good, thanks. And finance and facilities, Eleanor again.
I think we've covered the amended annual operating budget already. The agenda additions, just so that you're aware, Georgian glass is wine glass. And we're looking to see whether it is appropriate to replace the glass in Humboldt Park and Heights. Disposition of surplus schools. We are continuing ongoing discussions with the city regarding the elementary school site. I'll just leave it at that.
Okay. So you've made a motion that they be received those minutes?
Yes, I would like to move that the minutes be received as presented.
Seconded, Jeff, any discussion, questions? All those in favor? Opposed, carried. Okay, thank you. And then the Early Childhood Development Committee minutes of January 18th. and I think.
Normally I do, I was away that
Alan
week,
was in there, yeah.
Mike was there, and
Yeah.
I just saw it just as information,
Yeah.
yes, he saw something.
No, it was information for sure, yeah.
And it is just, that's how we deal with it, right?
Yes, yeah.
It is noted in number 10 that the group is going to have a full day of strategic planning on February 11th. That did take place, but we'll report on that at the next meeting.
And then the next one is the BCSTA Provincial Council meeting. I didn't ask you if you were gonna. No, okay. That meeting was held this past weekend in Vancouver. Alan and I were both there, and of course, as a director of the BCSTA executive, and I went as your rep. I just need to get my notes organized here. One of the things that we talked about, interestingly, considering the fact that we've just gone through our audit here on special ed, I guess there has actually been quite a bit of concern registered out there in other school boards with regards to audits. So we did have a presentation by two people from the Auditor General's office of the government who talked about the various types of audits, one of them being the special ed audit. Of course, we do our local audit here with our local auditing firm that looks at our financial papers and so on. But certainly the Ministry of Education can do other compliance audits as far as enrollment, where targeted funding goes, all those sorts of things. And then, so that presentation was the Friday night, and you know, I can't remember the names of the two people that did it, but probably doesn't matter. They did a good presentation. Sheila and Marvin?
No.
He had a good Scottish accent.
Yeah, Martin.
Martin, right. And then the next day, we actually, as part of the agenda, the next day of the meeting, we had a forum just to discuss the various concerns or issues that are being brought to the attention of various trustees across the province. One of the obvious ones that people did bring up there is the amended audit that was done. Certainly shows that the government is not meeting its objectives there as far as the graduation rate for Aboriginal students. There was concern raised about the impact on staff in school districts and the amount of work that they have to put into it. And considering that, what happens once the audit is out, and is there any follow-up to those audits if in fact the government is expecting some sort of action to be taking place? For instance, the special ed audit, if in fact there are problems with it, the districts are expected to pay money back to the ministry. And the point was that maybe school districts should be given the opportunity to correct things before they actually have to give that money back, which sort of makes sense to me. One of the questions that was brought up too during that discussion was whether or not there should be an audit of the government's education plan as far as what they're doing and how they're providing money and everything else. And I think they did say they're considering that one. Do you remember that? I think they are looking at it. It's a huge amount of audits that they do,
Yes.
Probably limited staff that they have, but I think that's one that they're looking at as far as the government's goals with regard to literacy and numeracy and everything else. So that would be an interesting one to see them go through. A huge one though, but it would be interesting to see. So that was the auditing topic.
Just a quick comment on that is that in terms of school districts, all the various audits are going to play an increasingly bigger role. And Sheila, the one person that worked there, just mentioned that in their Office of the Auditor General, there's a former Revelstoke student, I think Kevin Keats, who's working in there.
Really?
Yeah, so he's worked.
Yeah.
And then the provincial council also had its regular business meetings, so we were looking at the draft budget, and because of our enrollment, the fees are gonna stay the same, but because of our enrollment very slightly declined, there will be a slight decline in our fees that we pay to BCSTA. And as far as the motions, which I did send out to all the trustees, just for your information, I'll just quickly go through them. There was a motion that was brought forward by Sanish, and Jennifer, you'll appreciate this, that it was that the BCSTA urged the minister to provide funding for Pro-D for part-time and TPOC teachers, which passed overwhelmingly, by the way. So that was good to see. And I did vote in favor of it, by the way. There was good discussion on it, though. We also, the BCSTA wants to have a meeting with the Minister of Education and the Ministry of Finance regarding the whole issue of block funding and the holdback of funding. That apparently is causing problems in many districts. The compensation increase for principals and vice principals, there was a motion passed that although the thaw has been lifted for principals and vice principals and maybe now some other staff now, it's not currently being funded, of course, by the ministry. And so the request, again, is going to them to fund any of those increases. There was a motion from Haida Gwaii, and I didn't quite totally understand it, but it was that the BCSTA requests that the Ministry of Education expedite the approval of integrated resource packages for Indigenous languages. In other words, approve them. So I guess up in Haida Gwaii, they've had a curriculum there that uses the Haida language, but it has yet to be approved by the Ministry of Education. And it's been 3 or 4 years that they've been working with it and waiting for approval, whereas other districts have had it approved much faster. And of course, that impacts the Aboriginal students. There was motion that to ask the Ministry of Education, and that was then amended to say the provincial government to develop some sort of marketing strategy and public relations program to explain the revised curriculum. And after what was really, really good debate and interesting debate, because I went back and forth, it was defeated in the end. Basically, the concern was that people didn't want to have, in what really is the run-up to the next provincial election, have the ministry try to use it as maybe a political issue. Instead, it was, I guess, upon more that we do what we're doing here as far as the local boards doing what we can to explain the revised curriculum. So it was a really interesting debate. There was also a motion passed that there be additional mental health supports for the new students coming in, the Syrian refugees that are coming in. A lot of them are coming in without any ability to speak English and that sort of thing, and may have issues related to where they come from, basically war, where they're coming from, and the mental health issues that they may have. I think that was it. Any questions? Okay. That takes us to questions. If there's any questions. Michelle?
I have a question and I have a clarification, please. On the Education Advisory Committee meeting, I think, Bill McFarland, I think you shared that one.
Yeah.
There's a student here who had a math project and placement exam. Do you know the grade? I'm curious.
Grade 12.
Was it grade 12?
Grade 12.
But it's a grade 11 program. So she's a grade 12 student.
So it's a grade 11 math
Yeah.
project? Okay. Okay, and my clarification goes to Mike Hooker, please.
Okay,
You mentioned from the audit, so going back to the very beginning,
okay.
you mentioned how many gifted students? You said 50 gifted, I need those numbers again, please.
Then I would get them exactly for you. Yeah,
Okay.
50 is on the top of my head for our total gifted. I've got them obviously in the report, so yeah.
Okay.
So if you want to quote me, then I'm going to get you the right number for sure. It's 50, 85 for Qs, but yeah, but let me confirm that for you.
Thank you.
If you'd like to know the total number?
Yes,
The
please.
percentage, yeah, you bet.
And the
I'll
total
get that for you.
number of students, please. You said around 1,000, but I'm just curious as to what the
Or
number is
district.
You bet.
Yes, please, if you
Yeah.
can.
Yeah.
It's there.
Sure, I'll give it to you.
Thank you.
No total district.
Yeah.
That's it.
Thank you, all right. Good.
Jennifer?
Hi, I have a point of clarification too regarding the advisory committee minutes from January 26th, Education Advisory Committee. And it's on the second page regarding implementation. It's the last bullet under there. Last one, she added that teachers could highlight the work around recording. I did state that, but I stated that it could be done as part and parcel of the entire presentation, not to be given in the evening unless teachers are given release time to go.
Great, yeah, so, sorry, so that's that last bullet on implementation?
Yep.
Yes, okay.
I think with that, actually, it's good that you pointed that out,
Oh, yeah.
Jennifer. I think that what May referred to was what's going on at Columbia Park, the review of reporting that's maybe going there,
Yes?
on there. not
Because-
specific to any teachers or anything like that.
Correct, because Columbia Park is looking at a different template for
Yeah,
reporting.
yeah. Thanks. Anything else, David? David? No?
Just following up, so that will result in amended minutes? Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I guess we can motion to adjourn and move in camera then. Someone would like to do it. Elmer, seconded Jeff. All those in favor?